to our part about powerful communication in our Humanising Work Live Series with Bailey and French. We've been talking about humanising work in terms of both leadership and in what we can do with our teams. So we started talking about all aspects of human leadership, ways we can develop our emotional intelligence that are more relevant now than ever with everything we've been going through in the broader context in the UK and globally. And then we've moved on over the last 2 weeks to talk about teams and how we can flow together, how we can feel that we are able to be ourselves and have our own place in our team and feel confident in being valued and respected, as well as feeling aligned and in the same direction as all those people we're working so hard together with. And then we've moved on now to talk about how can we feel really connected to the people we're working with, not just aligned in the same direction, but really meaningfully connected as humans, and really just talking about that human thread throughout. So we're going to be sharing our discussion today. We are live on LinkedIn, we are live on YouTube, and we're live on Facebook. And we're also recording for afterwards. So welcome to everyone who's watching the recording afterwards, as well as those listening to our new podcast, Humanising Work with Bailey and French. So I'm really excited. Today I am joined by both Beth and Helen for a really rich discussion about one of the conditions that's really important for that cohesion within a team, which is how do we communicate really powerfully. So we're going to come on to talking about that and exploring it in more depth. But just firstly, I want to say hello, Beth. Hello, Helen. Could you just say hello and introduce yourselves? Beth, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Hi, thanks, Alex. So I'm Beth. I am a psychologist and coach and illustrator, and I live in Manchester in the UK. I'm really interested in supporting people to be well at work and real alignment with Bailey and French around helping people to be human at work. So that's kind of the space that I occupy. It's great to be here today.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Alex. I also, similar to Beth, I'm very interested in how we get people to thrive and flourish within our work environment. I'm just finishing my Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology at the University of East London, and I also work as a coach and a facilitator, and do a lot of work with Bailey and French because their values are really in alignment with my own in terms of just allowing people to be the very best. And this conversation around humanising work, I think, is just essential. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Oh, well, what a rich discussion to be having, and on a Friday as well. It feels a great timing at the end of quite a big week. So let's get into it then. Powerful communication. What do we really mean? And, why is this so important right now? With everything we've been through, all the changes we've been focusing on, it's so easy to just say, oh, yeah, we know how to communicate, to follow the guidelines around good communication. But what makes the difference to make communication powerful, impactful, meaningful, human? What are your thoughts on how we can make communicating with others really impactful to cohesion?
I'll go on that. I think when I'm delivering sessions around wellbeing at work, one of the biggest barriers that comes up is always around communication. People don't feel that they have enough, or they have too much, or it's not the right kind. And I think that in an organizational context, people really struggle to know what information to give and how, and it becomes very transactional. And I think the powerful communication piece to me is certainly that thing around anticipating what people need, what their response might be, and how you're going to frame things in a way that includes them in that dialogue. It's very much not talking to or talking at people, it's bringing them into that conversation, I think.
And picking up on that piece of it being transactional, I know, through the lockdown, of course, we've all been working remotely, and so many people are now looking ahead, and they're recognizing this hybrid world. And so we're going to be communicating remotely for some time to come. And I know how easy it is just to get online and immediately get into the business. And actually what we have lost in terms of that human connection, that human relationship, are those touch points where, you know, we're walking from our desk to the meeting room and we're just chatting, or we have the water cooler moments where we just stop and have those positive conversations. And I think it's absolutely essential in terms of that human connection and the inclusivity that Beth's just been talking about, is that we do stop and we pause and we bring ourselves into those conversations even more than we would have, you know, when we were in the old-fashioned workplace, in the old world as it was. It's really important that we bring ourselves into those conversations and to build up those human connections and to plan time in our meetings for those to happen.
Yeah, and you're right, you know, preparing for that is vital, isn't it? Because one of the things I noticed, and it's weird how I got used to working virtually, when I went back into an office environment and I was in the same room as people, I was exhausted so quickly because I recognized I was picking up on so many more things around the fabric of the communication and how people are, that I'd almost forgotten to attend to. And so we've been kind of like almost like over explaining ourselves virtually to communicate better and to make sure that we're being honest and authentic and making time for that. And yet almost making up for that, the fabric that's missed. And now we're thrown into this environment where it's hybrid, and I'm dialing into a meeting where there's 4 people in the room and they've got all of that going on and I haven't. And it's like, how do you get your space? How do you, because in a room, you move forward when you want to say something, you make eye contact when you're going to take over from where someone's talking to. But on a screen, if you're sideways onto the room, you haven't got the influence to be able to enter the conversation in the same way. So many barriers. And I think one of the ways certainly that we've been talking about, particularly for leaders, is sharing some of those more vulnerable pieces and just being more explicit. But I know one of the pieces that comes up a lot for people is how much vulnerability, what feels comfortable. It's a big topic, you know, and with so much going on at the moment, my goodness, we've got a bunch we could be sharing, haven't we?
I think it's a really good question. How vulnerable do we get? And I guess the answer is it depends on the relationship that we have already in place. And I know when I'm doing pieces of work around vulnerability, I ask people to focus in on what's the reason behind them sharing a little bit of vulnerability. So we know through Jane Dutton's work in terms of high quality connections that one of the pathways to building up those high quality connections is through trust, and part of trust is self-disclosure. So I think we need to be mindful of why we are being vulnerable in our conversations, particularly as leaders. And that if we are sharing, it's something that we personally feel comfortable sharing, and that perhaps we've processed sufficiently that we can hold the space ourselves as we are being vulnerable. So I know that, you know, if I share something that is that I think is vulnerable about me, I'm doing it because I want to demonstrate to other people that it's fine for them to be feeling the same way. But I have to feel comfortable in myself and secure in myself that I can hold that space as I'm sharing that vulnerability. Otherwise, as a leader, it becomes all about me. And that's what I don't want it to become. That's why I say I think it's really important when we are sharing vulnerability, particularly as a leader, being really mindful as to why we are doing that.
Yeah, I love that. It's that authenticity with skill, isn't it, Beth? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that why piece is fundamental. Like, why am I sharing this? Is it to get people to feel sorry for me and to, you know, to be human in quite an inauthentic way? You know, that we're all in this together, so kind of cope better and get on with it? Or is it that you're sharing your vulnerability and your story in order to help people see you as a human and to kind of connect with you and be able to relate to you? So I think that it's that why and the positioning of it, and people really understanding that it's going to happen and why it's happening. So it's not just, you know, that you normally have a Friday morning coffee that's very, very light, and then you're suddenly disclosing a huge amount about your childhood or something that's, you know, really going to kind of get people on the back foot. It needs to be carefully positioned, unless it's, you know, something small that's coming out of a conversation. You know, we can't always prepare for these things, but I think where possible, particularly if it's about a vulnerability that you're sharing, it's about helping people understand that why and being really clear on it yourself. What is the purpose of this? Is it about being authentic? Is it about being generating empathy in this collective? Is it about helping people relate to me and to understand the way that I communicate and the way that I make decisions? Am I giving you a bit of a key to understand that something where you thought perhaps, oh, you're very direct, I'm giving you a bit of an insight into perhaps why I'm direct, and helping you to understand it so that it becomes less personal, if you like, the sort of interaction piece. So yeah, that why and that positioning is crucial.
It is, isn't it? And being able to directly say that as well, and actually say, just so that you know, I wanted to share something with you today because I think it's important to our relationship, or because I think it's powerful for you to understand why I'm making this decision. And then you're outlining, aren't you? And you're setting the boundaries around it, rather than almost leaving yourself open to the unraveling. Because as we all know, when you're sharing something that's personal and vulnerable, there's a whole lot of emotions that are often connected with that. And that's why it feels human. And when you're then in that moment where emotions are connected to it, and you can be drawn back into how you felt in those vulnerable moments, you can unravel a bit and lose your thread. And that's really difficult, isn't it? Even if you've prepared, or actually you know why you're saying it, or you felt okay to say it beforehand, things change. We're human, aren't we? You know, it actually can take over us a bit. And then being able to catch yourself and say, gosh, that's impacted me more than I thought it would. Sorry, you know, and helping people not feel, because I'm very lucky to work with a team that's incredibly empathetic, and so they really feel what people are saying and experiencing when they're sharing things. And so if I'm I can be quite expressive and sometimes dramatic, and actually I can make it almost like too much of an emotion for other people, and so it's being able to also, as you said, know your audience. Who are you talking to? And how are they going to respond? Are they going to be judging you negatively? You know, is it going to be a safe conversation, even, you know, in whatever dynamic you have with those people?
And I think if you're part of a working world where that's not been encouraged, so at Bailey and French, you're right, that is, you know, very much part of it. But if you're working in an organisation where that perhaps hasn't been acknowledged or understood yet, actually it's taking small steps into that field of vulnerability. Otherwise, people will get scared, or they'll go, I don't know how to deal with this. So it's contextual. And I remember, you know, I've worked with a number of leaders, and I remember recently having a conversation with quite a senior male leader who actually came back after a workshop, having gone, I didn't like that vulnerability thing, but I tried it. Oh my goodness, it made a difference. And it's supporting, you know, whether we are leaders or we're supporting leaders, it's finding a way for them to start to take those baby steps so everyone feels safe within the boundaries and the context as to why we are doing this. It's a shift. It's a big shift for lots of people.
I'd just like to pick up on something that you spoke to there, Alex, and you as well, Helen. I think it's also worth remembering that the person sharing their vulnerability, their story, needs to retain ownership of it. And actually, if it does become too much, it's okay to say, you know, you need to retain control. It can't be that the uncomfortableness is actually yours, that you've started sharing something and then suddenly thought, oh, actually, I don't quite know that I've read this correctly. And, you know, it's okay to retain control there as well. I think that's really important in that authenticity piece, that you don't sort of think, oh, well, I've started sharing this now, so I'm going to have to tell everyone. You know, we have agency and control over what we share and what we impart. And I think it's okay to remember that that's part of that authentic piece as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? And I think we're moving on to talking about storytelling, really, because actually, you know, we share our vulnerabilities as part of a story, don't we? And I guess what I wanted to tap into really here is that it's funny how storytelling has become something very important as a communication tool in organizations. Certainly over the last kind of 5 to 10 years, it's been more prominent. I've heard more companies engaging in kind of storytelling training for leaders. And yet it's something we naturally do as humans, isn't it? I mean, we tell our children stories at nighttime. We watch Netflix and various other, programs and platforms for movies, stories to help us understand about relationships, understand about challenges, understand, exciting adventures. So why do we have to then relearn how to do that in organizations? And what's a good approach to storytelling to develop trust so that we have got that safety to share?
I've got a couple of things that come up quite strongly for me on this. And I think the first one is that we're sharing our story. We're not sharing other people's story. There's something really crucial to understand that, we can share experiences that maybe involve other people, but we need to be sharing what happened to us. There's no way you will build trust if you start telling other people's stories, because people will very quickly learn that you are not someone that can be trusted with personal information, because you will use it as an anecdote at a later event for your own personal gain. So it's really crucial we're kind of keeping ownership of our own story. And the other thing for me is really about, unless it's an event where you are on a stage speaking and sharing your story, and that's what people have signed up for, that it's collaborative and multi-directional, and that there is an element of it where you are asking people to share parts of their story or to nod and to engage with what you're doing. The whole point of sharing is that relational piece. So it has to be that if someone sort of interjects because they're having a strong reaction and saying, I can resonate with this so strongly, that you don't shut them down, that you listen, that you're able to bring them into that exchange. So I think there's something really important about, I guess, that the overall thing there is about letting people tell their own story and encouraging that sharing in the space, that it's not just yours to sort of be with us in a spotlight and sharing what's important to you, that you're bringing people in and bringing them along with that.
I loved what you said, Alex, about the fact that people, go into business and they're taught how to tell stories. Because it was interesting when I was thinking about this piece, I remember thinking, I don't know anything about storytelling. I know nothing about storytelling. And then I had to stop and laugh at myself of going, Helen, you're human.
Yeah.
Of course you know how to tell stories. That's how we relate to each other. Even this morning, thinking about my family over the breakfast table, I was telling my 10-year-old child about a story about a relationship I had with my history teacher, to just underline a point that she was having with one of her teachers. We tell stories all the time. And I think going back to this idea of being authentic, what approach to storytelling? Well, we kind of forget about learning how to tell stories. Trust the fact that you already know how to tell stories. We're telling a story right now, aren't we? This is part of storytelling. And it's coming back to the authentic self. And when you bring yourself into the story, and I agree with Beth entirely, it's got to be about you, and it's got to be, you're not revealing other people's stories in that forum so you can be trusted. But it's about, it's just opening the door once again and giving an insight for people into you. And when you do that, when you come from an authentic storytelling point, then people can really connect with us. And that's what we need. We need people to connect. If we stop thinking about it and just settle into it, we recognize we are all storytellers. We've been telling stories since the moment words could come out of our mouths. I think it's the most innate human thing that we have.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the theme that's come up for me throughout all these conversations we've been having over the last few weeks is that we don't have a lot of confidence in our human intuition, do we? And it's almost like this new push around AI is forcing us to really consider, what is the human level? What is the human layer that makes us the human, not the robots? And so when we're talking about storytelling, you're absolutely right. It's like we just forget that that's just part of us as humans, and we are able to do that really, really well. And we don't need qualifications to do that. It's in us. And having that confidence, it's almost like we've almost had that taken out of us in some weird way around the work environment. But there's an opportunity to bring it back in, I think, in the era that we're facing now in humanizing work. And I really wanted to talk about this piece around using stories to connect with others. And I loved what you said there, Beth, around, using it to open the door, to create the space, to make that platform. And that's, it's fundamental to the way I've worked my whole career. And I love creating collaborative learning environments where it's like, here, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to put myself out there. Now I invite you to try and do the same, but let's make it easy, small steps. Let's do that in pairs, not a large group. Let's do that with people we know rather than strangers, or sometimes the opposite way, strangers rather than people we know. Yeah. So, but telling stories to connect with others on a human level. I love the strengths connection. I'm obviously passionate about taking a strengths-based approach to organizations, and not just knowing our strengths, but actually applying it. And I think this is one of the ways we can apply a strengths-based approach, is really thinking about, how can I tell a story about me or people that I know that's going to help the situation, but how can I slightly tweak how I talk about it to bring in strengths language, to talk about what was the unique approach that person took in that story that made the outcome the way it was. So it's a subtle thing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But actually so impactful because our strengths are so unique. Have you come across ways of doing that, or what does that make you think about when I talk about strengths-based storytelling?
This might seem slightly unrelated, but I promise you it is. It's what's came up for me. A few years ago, I worked in a team, and we were all asked to, for a team meeting, present our personal and professional timeline. And we were given a brief that it just had to fit on a side of flip chart paper, so sort of A1 paper. And there was something that you said there that really triggered this memory for me about the method of delivery, like how you're saying something, because every single person in the team, it was quite a small team, there were 6 of us, but every single person chose to interpret that brief in a different way. So we were all telling the same parts of our story, but we were using a different method. So I illustrated mine, and someone else brought objects in and sort of walked us through a bit of a timeline. And someone else had kind of done, a list of all the gigs they'd ever been to. And kind of that was really bringing in that piece for them about music. And there's something for me about allowing people a bit of expression in how they share their story, and not just asking for it to be oral, or not just saying, well, I've shared it this way, so now you're going to share yours in the same way or the same manner. There's something for me about helping us to understand who the person is by the method in which they share their story. And that could be that actually it's drip fed, that it's not all coming out in one piece, that actually they're sharing fragments, and that over time we're piecing that together. And for other people, they'll be much more able to reflect and kind of pull things together in one big piece. So we kind of get a big bit of information at one time. So sorry, I know that doesn't quite relate to the strengths piece, but it's just that idea of actually letting people have some freedom in the way they express what it is that they're sharing.
I think it does, because I think it's talking about our uniqueness.
Yeah.
And our uniqueness is made up of strengths and more than that. So no, it's absolutely that. It's the freedom that we have as an individual to express ourselves in the way that we feel comfortable to express ourselves. And that's the human level bit, isn't it? And it's just, we've been talking, humanizing work is a big statement, and so this is really what we're doing, is kind of getting into the granular detail of what does that really mean. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, that unique expression of who I am, of how I am, of how I operate and how I navigate my world, which is different to your world. We've got to be better at that, because we are absolutely focusing on increasing diversity in every way we can. We have to be able to recognize and appreciate and value uniqueness. And that's the way of connecting with people, isn't it? I love that. I love that example, Beth. And Helen, I can see you're dying to say something.
Well, it's going back to that strengths piece. And I think the more we develop those conversations around what our strengths are, the more we have to adopt a more flexible approach to who we are working with, and as we recognize their strengths and their uniqueness. But I know that, when I'm doing workshops with leaders, and they go into breakout rooms and they share their stories, quite often their experiences, what they immediately do is go to the negative experiences, because we have a negativity bias. That's where we're more likely to go to share. And there is a place for that, for sure. But I think that if we can nudge people into sharing the strengths behind their stories, the strengths behind their experiences, then we start to see people in a different light. We can connect to them in a different way. And also, as we're telling those stories from a strength-based position, we also, I can see it. People they just light up. And that is so easy to connect to. And we want to be part of that. When we see that positivity coming from people, we go, oh, you inspire me. When you talk like that, I find you inspirational. I want to follow you. I want to be like you. And we can all think of people who do come with their strengths-based stories, even when it's coming from a place of adversity, particularly if it's coming from a place of adversity, and people can start to shape it in a strengths way. Then we and tell their stories from that position, which is not ego driven. It's just recognizing what their strengths are, because we are. Then we connect on a human level.
And that's it, isn't it? And I think I love what you're talking about, the way you're saying it, because it strikes me that we forget that we're very, very clever at sniffing out a fake. And you can tell if someone is just being genuine and they've got a positive intention. It's very obvious. But the minute it gets close to something that doesn't feel positive and genuine, our radars pick up on it straight away. We know, even if we don't respond, we know. And it's part in our head. We're going, something's not quite right, not adding up. And other people are very articulate about it. Oh, that doesn't sound like what I thought you were going to say, and it's really interesting, isn't it? That we are, again, we can do this as humans. We have got this radar. We've got this ability to detect the authenticity and that genuineness in people. And the strengths-based piece, we can pick up on it really quick.
It's making me smile because it's going back. I used to work in the education sector, and I delivered courses for teachers. And I would say to them, don't just take what I'm saying to you and go and deliver it unless you absolutely mean it, because your children, the students, are going to pick up and go, you've been on a course, miss, haven't you? And because they will know it's got to come from that human place. So if we recognize it in our children, children pick up on it, and we don't lose it. I think we just become more polite. we don't highlight it. And yet that doesn't mean it's not taking place for people. We have to recognize that people will sniff it out if we are not being authentic, if we're not being real. People will know, and automatically trust will start to erode.
Absolutely.
I think there's another little piece there as well that I've been reflecting on recently about how when I'm delivering training on things where there's so much evidence and data, something like sleep hygiene, right? We all know, it's obvious, it's common sense that if you sleep well, you're going to feel better, right? And there's reams of data that tells us. But for some reason, we sort of don't quite buy it. But if a friend of ours said, oh my God, I've been going to sleep an hour early every day and it has changed my life, we would be doing it. Like we believe people's experience more than we believe data, actually. Even speaking as a scientist, I can think of several things off the top of my head where I've been guilty of like, well, I know that that's good for me, but it's actually when someone else brings it to life for you that you sort of start to believe that you could do it.
That reminds me of Thomas in my team was talking about inspiring action. There's a difference between when you ask people kind of what inspires them and they tell you a story of someone that inspires them versus someone that actually inspired you to then go and do something differently. And inspiring action is so much more powerful than just effective inspiring. And I think that's what we're talking about here today in terms of communication. We're not talking about just being good at talking to each other. We're talking about really just finely tuning that and tweaking it to be really powerful, making a difference when we're in a team now more than ever with all the challenges people are facing. How can we either prepare in advance or in the moment be more attuned to the humanness of that conversation and what that person needs and how it nurtures our relationships and us to be connected together as humans? And I think we've explored trust and vulnerability. We've explored strengths-based nuances to those conversations, opening doors, giving platforms to other people to come and share. And we're already at the end of our conversation so ever so quickly. So I do want to just say thank you so much. What an insightful conversation. I feel like we've just touched the surface. We could talk for hours on this. But what a great way to spend my Friday lunchtime. Thank you so much, ladies. I really enjoyed this. I hope all our listeners and our viewers with us live and listening afterwards have also enjoyed this insightful conversation. We'll be responding to the comments. Thank you so much for sending those through. We will come back to all of those. It's lovely to have people joining us and know people are there in that engagement. So thank you so much, Beth. Thank you so much, Helen. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.